Good afternoon. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is hereby called to order for its regularly scheduled meeting of May 22nd. My name is Tim Rainey. I'm chairman of the board. Mr. Jeffrey Penzis serves as secretary of the board. Mr. Penzis, may I get a roll call, please?
Ms. Baker.
Here.
Mr. Bruce.
Present.
Mr. Claybrook.
Here.
Vice Chair Savage Selden.
Present.
And Chair Rainey.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is the oldest appointed governmental body in Memphis and Shelby County. We were established in 1925. The board hears appeals from the administration of the zoning ordinance, requests for variances from the zoning ordinance, and other requests as articulated by local zoning laws adopted pursuant to the enabling legislation. The 8 members of the board are appointed, 4 by the mayor of Memphis and 4 by the mayor of Shelby County, with confirmation by the Memphis City Council or Shelby County Board of Commissioners. We serve without remuneration. At this time, I'd like to swear in the staff. You may all remain seated. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Okay, thank you. And at this time, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our last month's meeting?
So moved. Second.
2 seconds. So I think we're good. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, the motion passes. Mr. Penzis, please give us a secretary's report if you have one this month, and then explain this procedure for this meeting.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. As for a secretary's report, there are no announcements this afternoon.
Okay.
The procedure for this meeting will be as follows. I will introduce each case as listed on the agenda. Copies of the agenda can be found on the front podium. For each case, the planner with the Division of Planning Development will give a presentation. At the conclusion of the staff presentation, the applicant will have 5 minutes to present his or her case. After the applicant's presentation, those speakers in support will have a total of 5 minutes. Then those speakers in opposition will have a total of 10 minutes. And then finally, the applicant will have 2 minutes to provide rebuttal. These times do not include time for questions from and answers to members of the board. The chairman may provide additional time, provided both sides are given an equal amount of additional time. All parties who wish to provide testimony to the board will be sworn in by the chairman. If a member of the audience wishes to provide testimony in support of or in opposition to a particular case on today's agenda, he or she will need to fill out a speaker's card for the record. Speaker's cards are available at the front podium. Once filled out, speaker's cards can be submitted to any DPD staff member at the left podium. We do not need speaker's cards from the applicant since their names are already part of the record. After all parties have been heard, the board will close the public hearing, make a motion, and then deliberate on the case. If the applicant or any speaker would like to be heard after the conclusion of the public hearing, or if a board member wishes to hear additional testimony from any party, a 2/3 vote is required to reopen the public hearing, pursuant to the board's rules of procedure. Please note that once the public hearing is reopened, both the applicant and opposition will be allowed to provide additional testimony and/or rebuttal. All motions by this board will be made in the affirmative. The private acts governing the board require the affirmative vote of at least 5 members to approve an application, regardless of the number of board members present. The board may also vote to hold an application for a period not to exceed 3 months with the consent of the applicant or 1 month without the consent of the applicant. All section numbers that we refer to come from the Memphis and Shelby County Unified Development Code, or the UDC, which was adopted by the Memphis City Council and Shelby County Board of Commissioners in August of 2010 and became effective on January 1st, 2011. I will introduce the entire UDC and make it part of today's record, thus dispensing with the reading of individual sections. The board is vested with the power to act on these cases before us today under the provisions of Chapter 9.22 of the UDC. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases have been filed in proper order, all applicants have been notified of this hearing, and all notice requirements have been fulfilled as required by the UDC.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. If you'll show on the record that Ms. Skurlock has joined us. At this point, the board will establish the consent agenda. To establish the consent agenda, the Secretary will call out each eligible case. If any member of the audience, staff, or board member objects to a case being placed on the consent agenda, he or she should make their objection known by a show of hands when the Secretary reads that case. Once the consent agenda is established, the board will vote on all cases placed on the consent agenda as a whole and will not hold individual public hearings on those cases. Mr. Secretary, which items on our agenda are eligible to be placed on consent this month?
Item number 1, BOA 2024-0016 as a hold for 1 month. Item number 3, BOA 2024-0021 as a hold for 1 month. Item number 4, BOA 2024-0030 as a hold for 1 month. Item number 6, BOA 2024-0039 as a hold for 1 month. Item number 7, BOA 2024-0040 as a hold for 1 month. Item number 9, BOA 2024-0042 as a hold for 1 month. And item number 11, BOA 2024-0044 as approval with conditions.
Okay, thank you very much. If we could get a motion to approve agenda items 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9 as holds for 1 month and 11 as approval with conditions.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded. I'll remind everybody on the board before we vote that by voting on the consent agenda, he or she affirms that they have read the staff report and are in full agreement with the conditions. Mr. Secretary, may I get a roll call, please?
Ms. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Bruce,
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook,
Yes.
Ms. Skurlock,
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Selden.
Yes, I find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Chair Ray.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, so those have been approved. Mr. Secretary, will you call our first case we're going to hear today?
BOA 2024-0018 at 2161 Monroe Avenue.
I see staff's here. I see the applicant and the opposition. Ms. Cobbs, do you want to give us an update on this case, or how would you like to do it today?
Sure, Mr. Chair, I can update you all.
Okay.
Kendra Cobbs, Division of Planning and Development. So this case was a public hearing last month, and it was voted to be held, and the applicant has revised their site plan so that now there's just one variance request, and it is from item 272D1B to allow the total living area of the one accessory dwelling unit to exceed 700 square feet or a third of the gross floor of the principal dwelling. And this is located in the Midtown overlay, and the zoning is also residential urban 1, RU1. Just looking at some of the surroundings, just as a refresher, the property is the L-shaped lot in the map to the right, and it is a single-family structure, and we do have office-type land uses that are to the west and also to the south, and also commercial land uses. And so these are just some of the photos of the area. The picture to the left shows the single-family structure. It is a 2-story dwelling. And then this is a view from South Cooper Street, and the proposed accessory dwelling unit would have access off of this alley. It's a 20-foot wide alley that backs up also to Playhouse on the Square. And so these are images from the backyard. It's actually from the backyard of the property with view to Playhouse on the Square, and also the 2-story office building that also has access off of the alley. another view of the site from the backyard. And so this is the update. Last month, we discussed that the proposal was for 2 ADUs on the lot, and the applicant is now proposing 1 accessory dwelling unit, and that is in this image to the right. So we have a 2-story accessory dwelling unit that is 1,014 square feet, and there is a ground floor garage. There's also still the 2 off-street parking spaces with permeable pavers. And so the setbacks are met. This is a 5-foot setback off of the alley, and then also a 10-foot setback from the side. And just looking at the floor plan, as I've stated, this is a garage on the ground floor with a patio in the rear, and then also an entry here to the east. And so this is on the upper level, that would be the living space, and it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit. And here are elevations from all facades of the proposed ADU. And just to, as a reminder, this is consistent with our Memphis 3.0 plan. It is proposed for, the land use designation is proposed for anchor neighborhood mix of building types, and this proposal is consistent with that. So to conclude, last month, April 24th, this was brought before the board. At the time, the applicant was requesting variances for 2 ADUs, as well as requesting a variance for the size of the structures. The ADUs are proposed to be 1,014 square feet. So with that, our code states that an accessory dwelling unit has to be either 700 square feet or a third of the gross floor area. So this ADU would exceed that by 485 square feet. And so that's the only request that is being asked for at this time. This is also to the south, adjacent to properties that are commercial in land use. Playhouse on the Square being the most notable. This is in the Midtown Overlay District with RU1 zoning, and that completes my report. Other than that, the recommendations are the same, that if there are any changes to the site plan, that it would come back to the board and or be administrative approval. There are fences that are proposed on the lot, so a fence permit would be required, and the fences can exceed 9 feet. So that concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Cobbs. Is there any question for Ms. Cobbs or other staff?
I have a question. Based on the square footage floor area of the principal home on the front of the lot, it would mean that what would be permitted by right would be around 615 square feet. I think that's what you were saying.
It is actually 529 square feet. The principal structure is 1,762 square feet.
Oh, okay. I thought it was 1,800 something. Okay. Okay.
That's the information that I have, that the principal structure is 1,762 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have a quick question. It seems like last time we talked about compatibility of a structure with the structure in the front. What does the code say about that? Like, having the structure in the back look like the one in the front. Was that something y'all think about, or is that just something that how does that play into the code? Because this one doesn't, but I understand why.
So we do have a section in the code that says that the ADU should be architecturally compatible. And I think with this, it is kind of, you have to read between the lines, look at the gray, because the structure would back onto the alley.
Sure, yeah.
And it's right adjacent to Playhouse on the Square. And so what is being proposed for the exterior of the structure is more consistent with what's there with the commercial buildings.
Yeah, basically what you think, what you're going to see at the same time.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions before we move to the applicant? All right, if the applicant will come forward and state your name and address for the record. We'll swear you in again.
Yeah, Todd Walker with Archimania, and I live at 2178 Monroe Avenue.
Okay, and do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay, go ahead and tell us more about this.
Well, just really quickly, I mean, I think what we heard last time is most of you were uncomfortable with the 2 units, and so we reduced it to 1, and we think, as Ms. Cobb says, that's in keeping with what Memphis 3.0 is all about. So we have it down to 1 variance. The 1 variance is size. Ms. Cobb, I need to look back at the square footage. I think that we have closer to 2,000 square feet. But what that comes to is basically a bedroom. Basically, we're adding a bedroom, a bathroom, and a closet. That's the difference, whatever that square footage is. So I also just wanted to point out 2 things. We're not in a historic district. And I think the last time it was confusing, and I think that it's judged like Central Gardens is in a historic district. And I just wanted to say that I have 2 letters of support. One is from a current Landmarks Commission member, Mario Walker, who is an architect with Self Tucker Architects. And you can read that, but he explains in a little over a paragraph why it is compatible. Also have one from Peter Warren, who lives or works just down the street on Cooper. Also sent a letter of support, and he was just rolled off of the Landmarks Commission. He also states why it is compatible. It was also mentioned last time that we're in the Midtown overlay. We are in the overlay, and it was said that metal can't be used in the Midtown overlay. Well, that's not right. We've done many buildings in the Midtown overlay: Ballet Memphis, Hattie Lou Theater, my house just down the street is all metal. So that code that is in the district overlay was written because they didn't want pre-engineered metal buildings. Now, the building also Playhouse has a metal building addition just behind us, and that's what the Q is. And I think if you look at the letters that the 2 architects wrote that were on the Landmarks Commission, you'll see that there's part of their explanation as to why it is compatible is because it fits with those buildings on the alley. That's really all I have to say at this point. Okay.
Would you be opposed, we talked about formerly was a triplex that's being converted into single family.
Right.
Could that be a condition that it be single family?
Oh, it is.
Part?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and they would be happy to write that in as a permanent condition. Yes.
Gotcha.
I would be happy for that.
That's what I thought, so I just was making sure.
And let me just say this. So I don't want this applicant to go there. If it doesn't get approved, what they will probably do is add on to the house to get the square footage that they need. Then we can build this structure just the way it is without going to the Board of Adjustments. I would rather keep it this way, have this single family house on the street. That's more in keeping with what the street is. Thank you.
Oh, well, hold on. Are there any questions for Mr. Walker? May not be. Okay, sorry. All right, then we're gonna move on. How much time did we have left? 7:33. So we have some opposition here. I got Mr. Collier. And if you'll give your name and address for the record again. I know you were here last month.
Yes, sir. It's George Collier, 2183 Monroe Avenue.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Okay. I know they're asking for 1 variance, but we're still got more variances that you're needing. 2.7.1C, 2.71E, 2.71F, 2.712D5 states that accessory structures and use may not have operations or structures not in keeping with the character of the primary house. It's not in keeping with it. It's not even close. You remember what they look like? The metal buildings? The primary is a 4-square, 2-story, built at the turn of last century. Shingle roof, clapboard, front porch runs the width of the building. This is a big metal building with no characteristics but metal siding and metal roof. It still looks like a storage unit. It also says that the accessory structure shall be compatible in architectural character. It's not close. This is zoned residential. They want to be in keeping with Playhouse. Playhouse is zoned commercial. It's apples and oranges. It just is. Sorry, they're in the wrong piece of land. Primary structure, this ADU has to have architectural character and functional connectivity. They're trying their best to move it as far away from the main structure as possible. They're trying to make it totally autonomous from the main structure. If you'll look at their planning, they're wanting, I don't know what it is, it looks like a lot of landscaping to divide the property. You're trying to put the piece of the ADU all the way against the alley, totally away from the main structure. And the square footage, again, it's supposed to be, we already discussed that, you guys have, that's the one they're wanting, that's another variance. They're only supposed to have approximately 30 square feet. They're at 1,400. Add the garage and we blow it up bigger. It's a big structure for a small piece of land. And the one thing I didn't understand is originally, they were also asking for a variance on 3.3.1B to allow for frontage on the alley. Now, I remember the last time I was here, I said, this is alley loaded. And the gentleman over here, I guess we're looking at the rules, one of you folks asked, and they go, well, technically it's not. Well, I started digging and digging because it looks just like one. And it's almost like, that duck adage, where, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Well, I think I figured it out. This one looks like a duck and walks like a duck, but doesn't quack. And the only thing I can see the difference is that the door, the human door, not the garage door, is not in the alley. It's on the side. But everything flows from the alley. So everything goes to the alley, has no connectivity to the main dwelling. So those are a lot of different variances you're going to have to look at. And that's not just a square footage. Also, everybody thinks this little alley is just some little benign thing. I'm going to tell you right now, this is one of the busiest alleys in the city of Memphis. I'm not joking. I live on this thing. There's 4 major businesses on here. And one of them used to be the Family Exchange Center. It's now called Kindred Place. It's all a nonprofit. A new nonprofit's moving in. Their charter says it has to be nonprofit. You know what nonprofits do? They support the community. So there's a lot of cars. It's not a business where it's 9 to 5 where cars just come in and they leave at 5. When that gets going, it's cars all the time. I assume you read the letter from Playhouse, who's represented here. Sent you a 2-page letter. I hope you've read that. You don't understand how much goes on in this alley. This is going to be, I would think it's going to be a very difficult situation for somebody to try to live right there. We're not opposed to having them. I hope they build a big place, but it's an L-shaped lot. Why not take the bottom of the L and make that the 2-car pad, garage, attach the dwelling to the garage, run it parallel with the property, make it L-shaped, make it a little bigger, but make it 1 story. Make it look like it flows with the neighborhood, not this big white metal monolith in the house. And what we're looking at is, this is not just for today or tomorrow. My house is paid for, but I don't get to stay there forever. I'm going to be gone, just like people were before me, and this neighborhood's been around for 120 years. And we'd like to keep it the same and in keeping with it, because we want other people to enjoy it after we're gone. And I just ask you, If you're having a Saturday morning, it's a nice day, or a Sunday morning, and you go out in your backyard and sit on your patio and you got your cup of coffee and you look up right next to your neighbor and you see a 30-foot tall metal container in the backyard and you go, boy, this sure looks good. I hope everybody puts one in. I mean, just picture this. And if you allow it once, this is what concerns all of our neighbors. If you allow it once, I'm not saying you board members will be here, but the next one or the next one, because the next investor is going to go, hey, have I got a deal for you? The next piece of property that comes up for sale from Monroe, you can build one of these two in the back and you can line the street with them. And then that just destroys everything. We're not opposed to having this. We welcome it, but we welcome stuff that's in keeping. You know, it's just in keeping. And I know you can just read it, but I'm not making this up. It is difficult to live back there with this Union Avenue, the noise, the lights. I mean, Playhouse and all the buildings, because of Memphis, they've got massive lights coming down to illuminate their parking lots. There's over 150 parking places. There are big dumpster trucks. There's UPS. There's Playhouse has charter buses. This alley is extremely busy. And I dare say if somebody wants to live right on that thing, they're going to be woken up all night long. There's lights coming in. I think it'd behoove them to change the design a little bit. Anyway, I'll stop talking. That's basically it. They're asking for one variance, but you've got a multitude of variances. And this setback, I don't understand this 5-foot setback. When I built a little 20 by 20 carport that I enclosed myself, I had to set it back 16 feet off the property line because of zoning. Now I'm glad I did. At first I didn't want it because it ate up my backyard. But when you start to back any typical SUV or pickup truck, they're 18 feet long. You're trying to back out of an alley, you're only 5-foot setback. You got an 18-foot vehicle, and you're trying to back out in an alley, and Playhouse has got a production going, or they've got their school buses in their charter or their carpool lane. You're not getting out unless you have a lot more room. You'll be doing about 15-point turns to try to get out of that alley. With that said, I'm just letting you know we're not opposed to them. We welcome them to build. It's a unique piece of property, and I think it could be developed really uniquely with an unbelievable ADU. Make it a single dwelling. I mean, single level, I should say. Single level. I think it would just enhance everything. And the gentleman that said they bought it, the LLC owner, said his father was there. His father's elderly. He's in the main structure's 2 stories. Eventually, he's not going to be able to do 2 stories. He may be able to move to the 1 floor. Anyway, I've probably used up my time, but I thank you very much for your consideration.
Are there any questions for Mr. Collier? That's all right. All right, thank you very much. All right, you have rebuttal time now.
Okay.
Well, no, wait, hold on. I need to make sure there's no other, is there any other opposition wishes to speak today? Okay, now you have rebuttal time. You have like 9.5 minutes.
Okay, I won't take that long. Ms. Cobb, do you have the other photos that I sent you? I just wanted, there's been a lot of conversation about this alley being active and Playhouses against our garage, or they're against our garage, but moving down the street or down the alley, most of the people that wrote opposition letters, including Mr. Collier, have garages. They have 2-car garages that face onto this busy alley. It just so happens we're closer to Playhouse. Also, the dock at Playhouse faces east and faces a parking lot. Yes, you drive in from the alley, but Playhouse or no one else owns the alley. I have an alley behind my house on the other side of Monroe, and on that alley, there are no parking signs posted every 50 feet. So that's how they control the alleys. And I believe there are some images of the other houses, Ms. Cobb, that maybe just another slide or 2.
Technical difficulties at the moment. It's slowly loading.
Okay. I'll pause my time there. Okay, so here's an example of what's, so to the upper right, I believe is Mr. Collier's two-car garage. To the lower left is his, or one of the neighbors to him, I believe, another two-car, or one-car garage in this case. And then you can see further down the alley, there's like a six-car garage. On the other side of Monroe, just, again, I just pulled one, someone that wrote a letter. They have access to the alley and they have a container in their, backyard. So what also these images show, and maybe there's one back or two, maybe it's forward, but these lots were unkept. They've been unkept for years. There were tires in them. No one's raised complaint about that. I mean, this owner is taking on this house that was neglected and was essentially a fire hazard, and is taking it up to a good place. It's going to have great street presence. And again, I will just refer to, it sounds like this gets confusing when people say, hey, there are all these other variances. You have great staff. Your staff, I know, has looked at this in detail since those comments were made last time, and we have one variance. That's what we're asking for. Again, I'll also rely on the people that are professionals that are sitting on the Landmarks Commission that wrote letters about compatibility. They're in your packets. I don't have to expand on that. But you see what's on the alley. I mean, if we're worried about what things look like, some of these owners should have done a different job with what they were doing as well. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Walker? All right. Thank you very much. All right. Are there any questions for, anybody want to ask any other questions before we go to discussion? Okay. If we could get a motion to approve BOA 2024-18 as conditioned by staff.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Well, I guess I'll
Yeah, go ahead.
speak up again on this one. I don't think we should approve this, and not because of the metal building or the architecture or what's going on in the alley right now or any of that. That's okay. I don't think we should approve it because it doesn't meet our standards. There is no hardship or practical difficulty that impedes the development of this property. It already has a house on it that was a triplex. It's being converted to a single family and renovated and so on. I just think that's wonderful. But at the same time, it doesn't meet our standards that there is hardship or practical difficulty that impedes the development of the property. It doesn't meet the accessory standards in the UDC. Part of it is because the appearance doesn't match the other building, but also it's not clearly subordinate to the principal home. It really is not connected with the principal home at all. It's walled off from it. I guess to maintain it, the owner would have to come down the alley. I don't know how that he would do it. And then here's my last point about this. Well, two, really. One is the reliance upon 3.0, which I'm all for 3.0. I love the goals. We need the density and so on, but it's a general plan. I don't believe it was meant, a general plan like that, without studies of what's going on in the neighborhood and a plan to where the density should go in the neighborhood. I just don't think it's ready for making individual decisions about land use. One more point. This street, Monroe, and the neighborhood, and you can hear it in all the letters if you read them, it's in a fragile state right now. The neighbors struggle with congestion from Overton Square. A lot of the homes have been converted to Airbnbs. If you don't live in Midtown, then you don't understand this Airbnb conversion that's going on. But I would imagine in Overton Square, there's really a lot of it. And I know one letter in particular said that people are feeling like it's no longer a place to raise a family. And so that's just not a good thing, I don't think. So my bottom line to this, it doesn't meet the standards. We just raised what you could have as an accessory dwelling unit. Why not let that work for a little while before we start automatically approving variances to it? And all of this, I think, should be implemented in a planned way. It should not be concentrated in any one neighborhood. The density should not be. And I just think that, you know, that's kind of like what I'm hearing on this. Well, it's supposed to be density around the square. But there's people that live there right now, and all we have is a general plan. And so I just think we ought to go by our standards for this and not approve this variance. That's it.
Okay. Other thoughts? Go ahead, Portia.
I agree with Mary. Actually, I like modern architecture next to old things, just as a personal thing. So even if we would redo the whole home and create something modern, cool with that. And that's the property owner's decision. But the accessory dwelling unit, and it's not just this case, it's the fact that we're seeing a lot of them for various valid reasons. It was a hardship to go from an income generating triplex to a single family structure. That's a hardship, I guess, that the owner entered in when they purchased the property, not one that's related to the code. So.
Let me make sure I'm clear on something. So the only issue before us is the square footage, right? The the building's conformance with the main dwelling is not an issue before us. But the unit is not going to conform with the main building. That issue, I guess it's just not an issue that we're concerned with.
If
It's not an issue
based
that's
on,
before us.
it's not before, that's not a variance they're requesting. And we've heard from staff that they don't think it needs to be requested.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't think, in general, I hear what Ms. Baker's saying about practical difficulty. That's the only issue I have, I think. I don't really care much about the alley. I don't care who uses the alley. Anybody can use that alley. So that doesn't really, just because somebody parks a bus there sometimes, they'll have to figure that out. That's not their parking lot, that's an alley. So that's for them to figure out. Nobody can, take over an alley or say, we use it more than you do. So I don't think that bothers me. The whole, how it looks, not what I would design, but from the alley, it looks like the building's next to it. You aren't going to really see it from Monroe. It's not like it's like it has another house on the back of it that's looking at it, It's, like on the north side of Monroe where Mr. Walker said he lives. So the only thing I'm trying to figure out is whether or not there's a practical difficulty there of us saying, I don't know if the L-shaped lot is a practical difficulty because our variance we're getting is because we want it to be bigger. So it's always tough to find the practical difficulty in something we want to build larger than what's allowed. It'd be one thing if we're wanting to build larger than setbacks, but we're building larger than allowable square footage. I do honestly kind of like the project, which is the problem. So that's why I'm struggling to just find what the practical difficulty is. If the staff has any answers for me on that, that would be great. We're already in discussion, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that, when we have cases that come before this board, we have so many different cases that, we meet with the applicants, they provide their answers, we provide those to you, and it's really up to everyone to make that determination. In the end, this is a unique property. The opposition even stated that in his discussion. It's behind Playhouse on the Square. It's directly adjacent to commercial. It's very close to, the Overton Square area. You may not agree with that, but I think we don't find it very difficult to find a practical difficulty in this one. And, we have a lot of cases that have these gray areas, and everybody has to make their own determination. So that's the information we provided that we relied on. So I think that answered the question.
Okay, yeah, I think it did. One thing I would like to say too, before we even vote, I would like to make sure, I don't know how it's going to come out, but I'd like to add a friendly amendment to the condition that if this is passed, the property in the front will be like, always single family, not a duplex or a triplex, which they were okay with. So I just want to make sure that's in there for us to do that. Is there any objection to adding that? Seeing none, so ordered. Any other discussion before we vote?
I think I'm with you, Mr. Chairman, in regards to the hardship. I think before my recollection is correct, when we had the two, there was some form of hardship because of the shape of the L. We had two units in a weird piece of the L shape, because there was one part that was owned by a prior owner, and then we now have one that kind of connects the last half of that and then to the current. So I somewhat remember that being an additive to what they were saying as the practical difficulty. But now that we have one unit, it looks like it's been pushed over. I'm having that hard time of clearly seeing the practical difficulty. But, in my mind, I do like the project. I do, maybe I'm like you, structure-wise or material-wise. But
it's definitely unique in how it's a piece that's stuck right up against commercial, where most residential isn't like that. Or, in every neighborhood there's something that touches, but a lot of it doesn't. I mean, that's definitely unique to have that. I think I could go with staff on that.
Yeah, but does that hardship affect the square footage? I mean, is that a hardship that keeps them from complying with the square footage requirement? That keeps them from making it smaller? I don't think so. And make it small enough to comply with the requirement.
Yeah, I got a quick question for staff. So the rule is 700 feet or a third, whichever's smaller. So 700 is a cap of what we could ever put in there just under normal code. Like, let's say if the house had been a 4,000 square foot house, are we still at 700?
Right.
Okay, just want to make sure I understood that correctly.
So I may have missed this. Who made the motion and who seconded?
I think you seconded.
I second.
So it's, help me understand, I'm asking rather than taking a position. So when we talk about a hardship, it needs to be a hardship that makes it impossible or difficult to comply with the rule. So it's a hardship that makes it difficult to make this building, to get the square footage below 700 or whatever the number is. So yeah, there are hardships, there are unique things about this property, but none of them, to me, it seems like they don't really factor into the square footage issue. If they do, help me understand that.
Well, I completely agree with that, and I think that's one reason why it doesn't meet our standards for approving a variance. There may be some unique factors about the property, but it doesn't prevent this owner from developing this property in the way that's permitted on this property, on any other property citywide. So for that reason, I don't see how it meets our standards for approval.
I'm gonna say, I think the only thing you could say is this, because of the L shape, the lot's a little larger, so they have more square footage than most of the other lots. That could be the relation to the size of the ADU.
If I could also add, so looking at this image from the backyard of the property where the ADU is proposed to be placed, in the answer to the hardship, yes, it's an L-shaped lot. It also, with the access point being from the alley, it's the same access for the commercial properties. So if you're looking from the vantage point of where the ADU would be placed, the ADU would face the 5-story Playhouse on the Square structure. So I think that also kind of factors into the hardship in that the size of Playhouse on the Square, even with this being a 2-story, 1,014 square foot structure, it would still be dwarfed from the vantage point of the ADU.
Question, is it's 2 levels, the garage is 1 level, but I guess I'm gonna call it apartment space above, I couldn't read the dimensions. What's the square footage of the dimensions of I guess the 2nd level? Is that included in the overall dimensions with the 1st and 2nd together, or is it just the apartment?
I'm sorry, are you asking the square footage of the lot?
No, just of the apartment, the ADU, the top floor of the ADU.
I would defer to the applicant on that.
Although I think part of your question was, so like the garage and any balconies don't count towards the square footage.
Yeah, that's what
It's only like the living space.
Okay, so only the living space is the 1,014 square feet. Okay, that answers my question, okay.
I saw earlier, I mean, it's basically a square, and I saw one dimension I could read down the side, and it was 30 feet, or maybe 31 feet, so it'd be about 31 by 31, roughly, but then it has the little bathroom that sticks off on the top, that's over the covered porch in the bottom, so that's probably where that other 100 or so feet come from, 115 feet.
Tiny and light, I was trying to use my magnifying.
Okay, any other thoughts before we vote? All right, Mr. Pensis will give us a roll call, please.
Mr. Bruce.
Would call me first.
You want to go first?
Yeah.
I'll say yes.
Mr. Claybrook.
Yes.
Ms. Scurlock.
I'll say yes.
Ms. Baker.
No.
Vice Chair Savage Selden.
Yes, I find that the standards of 9.22.6 are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Chair Rainey.
I'm a yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Pensis, we call our next case, please.
Item number 5, BOA 2024-0032 at 5485 Summer Avenue.
All right, I see the applicant's present. Is there any opposition today? Didn't think so. Mr. Skinner, good to see you presenting. If you will give us a staff report, please. Yes. There we go.
Hello, nice to be back before you again. Lucas Skinner with DPD. Case before you is BOA 2024-32, located at 5485 Summer. There's several variances to allow the relocation of a non-conforming billboard. Just a quick location map. This is at the corner of Summer Avenue and Shady Oaks. Land use map has commercial property surrounded by other commercial, industrial, office and institutional uses, very mixed use area. A little bit closer aerial look, again, corner of Shelby Oaks and Summer. Here are some site photos, including the sign, the subject sign. It primarily faces Shelby Oaks most. So here is a site plan submitted from the applicant showing the proposed right-of-way that is to be sort of backed in from the T-dot widening. In white shows the existing location, and in yellow, which I realize now is a little small, is the proposed location. Keep things moving along. Basically, in conclusion, this case is coming about from a T-dot road widening project along Summer, roughly about somewhere around 10 feet to be widened. So that billboard is located within that right-of-way. So essentially, to summarize a lot of the UDC points, we are essentially of the opinion that given the non-conforming section of the code, that relocating the billboard anywhere else on the site would not be in line with the UDC and essentially would not be in line with several of these clauses. I included these just to show where from the code we were getting these. I'll keep going through, but happy to explain if needed. So all that being said, very brief presentation, but we are recommending rejection. However, if approved, we have 8 conditions. As stated, I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Skinner? All right, Ms. Solomito Baser, if you'll give us your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brenda Solomito Baser, Solomito Land Planning, 1779 Kirby Parkway, Memphis.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. In reading the staff report, there are, the client and myself, we have some very grave concerns about a couple of the issues. One, this case is almost identical to a case that this board approved November 21st of 2022 at Lamar, 5121 Lamar, where TDOT was widening the right-of-way. This is the exact case. TDOT is relocating the billboard because of the widening of the right-of-way. Otherwise, the billboard would be there till the end of its life. Billboards are, by code, the same thing as a principal structure. So it'd be no different as if this were a building being relocated. It is a legal non-conforming use. This case not only has a physical hardship, it also has a practical difficulty. And I think in the staff report it says we don't have a practical difficulty. And I beg to differ. The physical hardship is the oddly shaped lot, and that they are taking a great deal of the frontages of both right-of-ways. The practical difficulty is that TDOT is coming in, widening it, and taking the billboard. Another issue that we have concern about is staff's opinion, stated in the staff report, that the applicant is being compensated, therefore he should be whole and he can go somewhere else. That's not the case. The agreement with the applicant is a relocation fee. It does not make my applicant whole. There's 14 years left on this lease. So, I don't know that me or staff is in a position or qualified to make a statement that this asset is okay to go away because they're getting paid. Nobody knows what they're getting paid. It's a relocation fee. On a 14-year lease, that is a taking if my client is not allowed to relocate this billboard on the same property. Now, if we simply take the billboard and move it behind the building, that first building, we can meet all the setbacks. The two issues that we don't meet is we're still a legal non-conforming use, and we would have two principal structures on one lot, which this board has approved that in many instances, because no matter what the opinion is about billboards, they are assets. And the UDC does categorize them as a principal structure. So those are our concerns that I don't believe the staff report is accurately portraying our situation here, nor are some of the findings accurate. We offered to do some site plan changes, but I don't think that would change their opinion, and that's okay. So I'm offering up those as there's 14 years left on this lease, and if we simply just move it behind the building and still maintain it on the Shelby Oaks Drive frontage, that it will meet the setbacks. So the variances requested today would be to allow two principal structures on one lot, and then to allow this billboard to remain a legal non-conforming use till the end of its lease. So we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Ms. Baser?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we know how many feet the new proposed right-of-way is going to cut off from the original?
So there's some TDOT plans, I believe, in your staff report that show the encroachment is onto Summer Avenue. I think we measured it out. It's over 10 feet on Summer Avenue, and then it tapers down in that radius to meet the existing Shelby Oaks Drive right-of-way. Yeah, that light blue line is the new proposed right-of-way line.
Right.
And so if you figure you've got like a 4-foot sidewalk along Summer Avenue, that's about double. So it could be 8 to 10 feet, and then it tapers down to meet the existing Shelby Oaks Drive right-of-way.
Thank you.
How does the applicant, their rights in the property, is it a lease? Is it a perpetual easement? How do they have?
It's a leasehold.
It's a leasehold. How much longer on the leasehold?
14 years.
Oh, so we aren't committed with a client for 14 years. We have 14 more years of paying that lease to have a sign there.
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure.
So at the will and pleasure of the property owner, at the end of that lease, they can continue or not. So, I mean, there is a termination date at 14 years.
And Brenda, there are no options or anything like that after that, that the lessee can exercise, correct?
Any options after?
Unless the landlord terminates the lease at the conclusion of the first period that 14 years.
So the applicant is stating that there is an option unless the landlord decides to terminate the lease at the end of this term.
Okay, so he has a termination right as the landlord as well. Okay, thank you.
And again, we're asking just to simply be treated as the case that I mentioned on Lamar Avenue. I personally represented that case. There was an expiration date where that billboard would come down. It's on a state right-of-way, just like here it's on a state right-of-way, very similar conditions. And we just ask that we be treated the same consistency and rulings with regard to these TDOT right-of-way takings.
Questions? All right, thank you very much. I don't see any opposition. If y'all are ready to discuss, if we can get a motion for 2024-32 as conditioned by staff.
So move.
Second.
Claybrook and
I'll go first.
go ahead.
So I remember the case that Brenda brought up, and to me, if this was my property, I know that the city does not like billboards, but I have a contractual obligation, and just because the state is coming and widening a road, not terminate that contract, in my mind. You know, moving a sign 5 feet and then putting a,
Hey, can you speak to the mic?
yeah, sorry, moving a sign 5 feet and then putting a sunset on it to where the sign has to come down at the end of this term. So there's no option that he can exercise. I don't have a problem with.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I think I'm with Mr. Claybrook on that. I think that was the fair treatment we did on that other case, was letting the tenant live out the lease and then sunset it and terminate it at that point. I'm in agreement with Mr. Claybrook on that.
Let me try this. Would y'all think any differently if the sign had burned down? If a sign could burn down or made out of metal, would you think any differently about them rebuilding then? It wasn't their fault. Something happened, it burned down. All these things that are grandfathered in, I'm just trying to talk about it. And I do remember the Lamar case.
Right.
The idea is when you get the bite of the apple, you take the bite of the apple.
I would want to look at the lease language in a situation like fire. If the tenant has a right to rebuild in that lease, then that's kind of how I would make that decision.
Right.
But that's just me.
Then I have a question too. If rejected, would the client have a case against TDOT to be paid the 14-year lease? Because basically they're doing an eminent domain type situation.
Well, there has been a relocation fee paid, which I would imagine is part of that eminent domain of it. They put it, I don't know what the dollar amount is.
But
they
it's
put some
not-
dollar on it.
Right, but it's not enough to.
That I don't know.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Would they have a case to recoup the 14 years?
That would be for the landlord, right? It's not before us. Because the
Okay,
landlord's
yeah.
who's owed money
Yeah.
on the lease. I would imagine if going way beyond, this is probably more in
Yeah.
her purview.
Yeah,
of
yeah,
law.
it's definitely not
You
my
know,
purview.
when a lease becomes impossible to perform for other reasons.
Right.
Right.
I don't know if that lease is gonna hold up anymore. I don't know if the landlord can get the benefit of the bargain if he now no longer can give access to that land, he's not owed rent.
And it makes it void.
Yeah.
And it also seems like that, for the just compensation, if it can't be relocated, that would be between Lamar and TDOT rather than us. Because when I asked TDOT about it, they just said they approved the relocation fee, and that is all Lamar requested, so that is all they considered.
And I'd say because.
We're in discussion.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah, sorry, that's okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think the staff got this exactly right, and I'm going to support the staff recommendation.
Any other thoughts before we vote?
So if we approve it, I don't know how we're gonna end up voting, but if we approve it, there are conditions that the staff has suggested, recommended. If we do approve it, we need to be cognizant of that.
Let me ask about a few of these real quick to Mr. Chairman. Number 8, the non-conforming off-premise sign must be removed within 1 year. Can you tell me, is that, we would approve it, but if that condition's there, then they still have to remove it after 1 year?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, very strict sunset clause.
yeah. And I think what Carson was talking about, hey, we got a lease for 14 years, we give them 14 years, correct? If that's what,
Yeah, I mean, I know y'all are saying, okay, well, we'll let Lamar and TDOT, that's just going to turn into a lawsuit with the landlord involved at some point.
Okay.
You know, if TDOT, which doesn't involve us, I understand, but.
if it does, it involves Mr. Rowling.
But I mean, I've dealt with TDOT enough to know that they're not in the business of compensating somebody for 14 years of lost lease value. Or if they are, it's not going to be anywhere close to that.
I have a question for staff. If this is approved, that it comes down in 14 years, how would that ever be implemented? How would it ever come back to your attention after 14 years to say, okay, it's time to take it down?
We'd have to make good notes and hope
Huh?
that we'd have to make good notes and hope our successors remember those.
Right.
Jeffrey will still be here.
Well, but then I think it would be very difficult for that to happen. Even 10 years is a very difficult thing to implement with all the other stuff that's coming at you new all the time.
Well, the 14 years, we're getting that from the lease term, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so, okay, that's the lease. If there were no, if TDOT had not come through and widened the road and the sign was still there, how long would the sign still be up? I mean, that has, would it be able to stand as long
Right,
as?
there would be no changes to the site. It would just continue as a legal non-conforming.
There would be no,
Like, if there are no changes to the site, right, there's no
it would
right of
just
way.
continue.
Right, we have no, I mean, it's just still stays. It's just a
okay,
normal.
so it could stay
Yeah,
indefinitely.
the code does have a few triggers, like one of them, if the principal use of the building changes, then they would have to get rid of the
Right.
billboard. Like, there's a few random
Right.
triggers like that could also get rid of it.
Yeah, but a lease agreement wouldn't affect how long the sign could
Correct.
stand.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of- at least
Theoretically,
the
if
14 years is kind of irrelevant.
no changes,
Yeah,
the building could be used like it is, and the sign could be used like it is in perpetuity until somebody triggers something.
right.
You know, like we had on Highland, where they had a change in use of the building, and that sign we had issues with at, what's the name of the place? Whatever.
Going back to yours, the language of, and I know we're saying 14 years, but to your point, if something happens to the.
And I wasn't even suggesting that, just, I was just asking.
Right, so if we're just saying, if we could just, in any term, say the lease term or the current lease term, that way, if a life event or acts of God or something happens where the lease itself is terminated, then that would trigger to us. So it could be 14, but it could be 3 years. I mean, I don't know what could trigger, because a legal lawsuit could also make this particular lease void and null or terminated. And so I think if we just tread lightly and use lease term or current lease term, that would help if we should vote in that direction. That gives it a little bit more attention and leeway of when to bring down the sign if we vote that direction.
Okay, so if someone wants to make a change to that, if we're going to not accept the staff's projection, we have to do something to number 8.
Yes.
No matter what, because that just gives them a year. So if someone suggests something for that, I don't know that I think I'm going to accept the rejection. So if someone else wanted to, I don't want to make the condition on something I'm not going to vote for.
I'll propose a friendly amendment,
Okay.
what Madeline just said, or number 8, to make that coincide with the existing lease term.
I would say if we're going to do that, 14 years is a long time. It's also, I said, it's based on a lease, which is, is different from the owner's, title or interest in the property. I'd rather it be something much shorter than that, maybe 5 years or something. 14 years is a long time.
Do it short enough, because they're going to have to move it.
Right.
So you do it short enough, like the 1 year, I don't think they're going to rebuild it for 1 year.
Right.
I don't know if they'll rebuild it for 5. They probably would for 14. But I don't know where that is. But yeah, so you're offering 14, you're offering 5. Other thoughts on those time periods?
I think I could give a 5. I think I could vote to a 5-year time frame. So that gets you through at least least most of, if there is a lease, or that you have time to work out some other alternatives.
Place to put a sign, not on that property.
I'm fine with that, if that's what the consensus is.
Now they could, having a sign, I know we had to have them in certain places. If the building wasn't there, they could have a sign at that corner. Is that accurate? Because it's like along a highway.
They could not build a new off-premise sign even if they were the only structure. It has to be a U.S. highway, I believe. And I think this is a state highway, if I recall.
Okay. So even if the building went away, we're still in variance land.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so I have two people saying 5. Is that, we'll make it 5. As far as number 8, non-conforming off-premise sign must be removed within 5 years of the date of this approval would be number 8. Any other comments before we vote? Okay, could you give us a roll call, please?
Ms. Baker?
No.
Mr. Bruce?
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook?
Yes.
Ms. Scurlock?
No.
Vice Chair Savage Selden?
Yes, I find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 are being met. It will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Chair Rainey?
No.
Motion fails.
Motion failed. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Mr. Penzis, you'll call our next case.
Item number 8, BOA 2024-0041 at 1155 Forest Avenue. However, I believe the applicant is not here.
Okay, they're not here.
Both cases, number 8 and number 10, will need to be held, as the applicant is not present.
Okay, so